What's up YouTube, Jason here with Bite My Bits. Today I'm going to be covering the network attached storage device from Terra Master. That is the F2-220. I'm going to try to tell you what I think about it and what I think would be kind of, the most optimal use scenario for a device like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the boring stuff out of the way, or unless you're kind of like me and this is kind of the exciting stuff. The Terra Master F2-220 has an Intel dual-core 2.4 GHz CPU. That includes 2 GB of RAM, a 1 GB NIC. It supports up to 8 TB per drive, and it can handle 2 drives. Now, this particular model only handles 2 drives, whereas Terra Master does offer other solutions that offer more. So this is kind of the, I'm going to say, lower-end model of their lineup. For my testing, I did have 2 red drives. These are NAS-specific drives offered by Western Digital. I just happen to have a couple of those spare laying around. I have no idea why. So for my testing today, I had my 2 red drives set up in RAID 1. Now RAID 1 is the mirror RAID, where 1 copy of a file is duplicated to 2 drives exactly. So if you ever have any kind of failure with one of those drives, you automatically have a complete and full backup on the other drive. Now you can either use a 2.5 or a 3-point drive in here, and as far as your RAID options, well, you only have 2 drives, so you have an option of either RAID 0, RAID 1, or JBOD. Now, if you're familiar with other network-attached storage devices, like for example, a Synology system, you'll know that they have their own Linux-based operating system. Synology, for example, is DSM, whereas Terra Master is TOS. Now, this Linux-based TOS operating system will allow you to install applications or make other configurations to your device. You can do things like set up secure storage with different users and permissions for each one. I think they say you can do up to 1,000+ different users. It's going to handle all of the basic sharing protocols. It's going to allow you to share with Linux computers, Apple computers, or standard PCs. One of the things I really do like about this device that it actually shares with the majority of the other devices out there is backup options. So if you happen to have another one of these devices or just another device in general that can run the rsync application, you can back up everything on here to that on a schedule, or vice versa for that matter. This also handles Time Machine. So if you're an Apple user, there you go. Now for media, which obviously is an area where I will get excited, it does handle Plex. Technically. It also handles UPnP, DLNA, and it can be an iTunes server. And on top of all this, you can also configure it to sync with your Dropbox or backup data off of your phone or mobile device. So now that I got all the features out of the way and the things that it can technically do, let's cover some of the things that I found when I was going through my test. So of course, the first thing I did when I got everything booted up is I went into the application manager. And that actually brings me to my first thing, and that's Plex. I installed Plex right off the door. I mean, I just had to test it out. I was like, hey, if this thing can actually be a Plex media server, heck yes, I want to test it. However, I kind of had my doubts. And I had my doubts specifically because of the processing unit. It's only a dual core 2.4 gigahertz processor. So I knew right off the bat that it's not going to be a fully capable media server by any definition. However, with the Plex media server, you don't always need that, especially if you're only serving media inside your own home and you can serve everything without the need of a transcoder. So I wanted to test that out. First, let me say this. When I first originally tried to install Plex, it took a long time and I didn't see any change or any indication that Plex was installed. So I ended up having to refresh my screen, try to install it again, couldn't get it to install. I ended up having to restart the NAS altogether. So this is kind of my first experience trying to install a piece of software. But you know what? After I reset the device and tried to reinstall Plex again, I got it to work. Okay, so after I installed Plex, as just kind of a heads up, when I initially tried to click on the web link in order to start the web interface to configure the Plex media server, it didn't connect. I was thinking that maybe something was wrong. Maybe I had some firewall issues or some routing issues. I don't know. I went through that quick panic, like what did I screw up type of thing. But in the end, all I had to end up doing was wait for about 30 to 45 seconds, and then I was able to access that web interface from my computer. And really from here, that's about as far as I got. I mean, I did go in, I did try to configure or add a Plex library for a couple movies. I did this because 1, I wanted to see what it could do, and 2, I also needed to copy some kind of files to the device in order to test it out. So what I did is I copied 2 movies, Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2, set it in its own directory, pointed Plex to it, made it do its thing, and nothing. Didn't get any movies popping up, didn't get any kind of indication that it picked up those movies whatsoever. I went through and double checked my work, couldn't find it. Okay, So right off the bat, I'm starting to think, okay, maybe I screwed up permissions or maybe didn't take a step that I was supposed to. So I went through and checked the permissions and just basically try to open up everything to where everyone had read and write. And changing permissions to that folder, for some reason, broke Plex, and I couldn't load the web interface anymore. So yeah. It was at this point in time I decided, hey, what am I really testing here? Its ability to physically run Plex? That's really not a question. At least I didn't think it was. For me, I was just trying to see what kind of capabilities it have. But at the end of the day, this is not going to have any kind of transcoding ability, at least in my opinion. So ultimately, it's just going to be a limitation of the hard drive speeds and the network attached to it as far as how many movies I'm going to be able to play off of it. Because as we all know, that direct play does not really require a lot of resources. So something like a simple network attached storage device can easily serve media. It's going to be the same thing like using a DLNA client, except it's going to have a little bit more software running in the background in order to make that happen with Plex, not DLNA. So honestly, from here, I just uninstalled Plex and moved on. So just to do some more testing, what I did is I did install the download station manager that allows you to download, torrent files. I didn't actually download any torrent files to test it out, but I was just more or less testing to make sure that it was still working because I changed the permissions and broke Plex. So with the software application through the Terra NAS software, I would have to say that overall it's just a little too slow, a little too simple. When you're used to something like a Synology, something like this is just way more basic. But even with its limitations, with the additional software you can install, one thing I did notice is that you can SSH into the device, just like any kind of Linux box, and you could probably install custom applications. So the question has to be asked, what do I actually think about the Terra Master F2-220? Well, honestly, it just works. I mean, it works as a storage device. Through my testing, I was able to read and write data from it pretty close to the max of the NIC. I didn't notice any kind of major flaws with it as just a basic storage device. When I set it up, I set up my RAID, everything just shared automatically. I was able to find it on my network. I logged in with the username and password that I configured. I mean, it just worked. It was really simple. And the way I look at it is if I'm a basic home user or just a generalized user that needs a little bit of some offsite backup, this is perfect because it handles what you need for storage. However, for any kind of an advanced home user, somebody who wants to get a little bit more out of their network attached storage device, somebody who needs some other options like mail servers, Plex servers, VPN servers, whatever. Someone who wants those extra features at a device, treating a network attached storage device as more of a home server to do almost anything that they wanted, this is not it. This is definitely way underpowered for something like those extras that you might want. It could technically run an SQL server or maybe a mail server, something like that, but it's probably not going to do it very well. Now I decided to do a very simple test, right? Stress the CPU just a little bit and see how well it can handle file transfers while being stressed, because it does offer other applications that you can install, like the Plex Media Server as an example. And during my test, I found that while the CPU is busy, this thing is slow. And I mean dog slow. When I was trying to transfer a movie file to it, I think it was like 8 or 13 gigabytes or something like that, I was getting just horrible speeds. I mean, it was just unusable. So if I wanted to rely on this for any kind of a daily application where, I'm going to be reading and writing files to it, and I wanted to also use it as a Plex media server or a mail client or a VPN server or whatever else I decided I want to throw at this thing, I feel personally that if it ever got to a point where the CPU is stressed, everybody that tried to use it as a file server, which is supposed to be a file server, would be punished. But really, that brings me right back to what I said originally. As a network attached storage device, it just works. When it's not busy doing anything else, you're trying to handle other applications that you decide you want to throw at it, it's got great speeds. I'm talking 95 megabytes per second, read and write. It's been reliable, didn't go down. I tested copying files to and from it on multiple different occasions after it sat there for a while, after I let it write for a while, read for a while. I tried other applications, high-seek applications like video editing off of this device. It was a little slower because it was only a gigabit and it's just some basic hard drives, but that's not bad. It functioned exactly how it was supposed to be. It just worked as a network attached storage device. Do I think it's going to be a Plex media server or a mail server? No. But as a network attached storage device, it works perfect. So in conclusion, who is this for? Well, it's very simple, and if you've been following along, you've probably figured it out by now. If you need a hard drive that's not on your computer, something that you can easily manage users by and have multiple people maybe in your household, or maybe even just one, accessing this off-site storage median, then this might be the perfect device for you. If you want something that's going to be a Plex media server or a mail server or something really much more advanced or CPU intensive, this might not be the device. You might have to look at spending a little bit extra more money on a different Terra Master device, one that has a quad-core processor. But for me, my overall view on this device is that it's only good as a hard drive. Before I let you guys go, I want to give a shout out to Terra Master for sending me this device for review. Overall, like I said, it's a pretty good hard drive. And I want to thank my viewers for subscribing to my videos and watching my content. I appreciate every single one of you. So, have a good day.